Welcome to this week's Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball with me, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe. Well, this weekend is the weekend of the Munich Security Conference, which is the annual gathering of the security policy community in Munich. This meeting has been going on for well beyond 50 years now, and it's a great opportunity to take the sort of the transatlantic temperature, the mood music on security and defense issues, a little bit like Davos does for the economic and financial community. Well, this year the mood is likely to be rather downbeat. Donald Trump has already defined the agenda just a couple of days ago by announcing at a campaign rally in South Carolina that if he were president, the United States would certainly not provide NATO protection to those delinquent countries, as he sees it, who are not spending enough on their defense, below the NATO benchmark of 2% of GDP. And he even, outrageously, seemed to invite Putin to attack those countries as a kind of punishment for the fact that they were not good allies. Now, you can say that, of course, this is classic Trump. He's not yet president, so why should we worry about it? It's a campaign rally, and election rhetoric always flies high in these particular settings. And you might also think that last time round, Trump made similar threats, but they were never really acted upon. You could also take the view that this is classic Trump shock therapy, where he goes over the top with these remarks precisely to get the Europeans to panic and raise their defense budgets in a way that may be the more gentle persuasion of previous American presidents, at least in Trump's eyes, had failed to do. But of course, it's different this time round. When Trump was president, Russia had not launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We weren't on the kind of war footing with an over-militarized Russia that we see today. NATO has had to return to collective defense. And when the leader of the alliance, or a potential leader of the alliance, at least somebody who's got a serious chance of getting into the White House, announces that he would like to leave NATO, or wants a two-tiered or a three-tiered alliance where America's level of protection is linked to European levels of spending. This can only encourage Putin to think that the West is weak and divided. It will weaken NATO's deterrence and lead to a more uncertain world. But it's not just Trump. The war in Ukraine is not going so well. And leaders in Munich this weekend are going to have to sort of take account of the fact that the new Russian chief of defense, Sersky, who has just come back from the front, has announced that Ukraine is lacking ammunition. The men are tired. The Russians are now advancing. They've taken parts of Advika in the Donbass, which the Ukrainians have been doggedly defending throughout the winter, forcing the Ukrainians, at least for now, into a tactical retreat. And this therefore bodes the question of to what extent will Ukraine really be able to hold on in 2024 as well. There are war warnings yesterday from the Estonian foreign minister that we've heard repeatedly in the last couple of weeks, that we need to get ready for war with Russia in as little as 3 or even 5 years from now, to darken the mood. And then finally, beyond Europe and beyond Russia, the Middle East crisis is not getting any better. Israel looks set to enter its fourth month of military operations against Hamas soon, with no end in sight. We've had the danger in recent weeks of escalation with Iran, in Iraq, Syria, and with the Houthis in Yemen too, and also the prospect that as the war grinds on and the humanitarian situation in Gaza gets even worse, of a growing disconnect between the Europeans wanting to put pressure on the Israelis and a Biden administration that seems unwilling or unable to do so. So, with this sort of gloomy backdrop for Munich, what can the leaders realistically do apart from commiserate on the poor state of the world? Well, firstly, is to take burden sharing seriously and to get the message across to the United States that whatever Trump says, the reality is rather different. For example, yesterday we heard from the NATO Secretary General that 18 allies out of the 31 are currently spending 2% of their GDP on defense. So that at least shows that the cursor is moving in a good direction. It was only 3 when Trump was president and only 9 when Biden first became president. This year, the Europeans will spend $380 billion on defense. That's not a small sum, and their spending on Ukraine, if you count into the equation humanitarian aid budget and so on, is double what the United States has been spending. So Europe has not got a bad story to tell. It just needs to communicate it better in Washington. The next thing that has to be done is to sit down with the Ukrainians and figure out a good strategy moving forward. 2024 has to be about helping Ukrainians to hold on to what they have already, to make sure that Russia is not able to benefit from its current superiority, 4 times the tanks and ammunition that the Ukrainians have, to advance further, to allow Ukraine time to recruit additional soldiers, to replace damaged equipment, to hold the line with the prospect of attacking in the future. Most experts believe that Russia can't keep up the current rate of production. In 2 to 3 years, it will have also exhausted its stock. So this year is a year for helping Ukraine to hold on as well. Thirdly, the Europeans have now got to take their defense seriously. Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, rightly says that Europe should not go it alone, should not separate from the United States. I don't see any European who seriously wants to do that, but the prospect now is that the United States, under a Trump administration, separating itself from Europe. For example, in a 2-tier Trump NATO, where only, let's say, 1/4 or 1/3 of the member states, 1/2 at most, would be defended because they're the ones that spend. Who are going to protect the half that don't? And here the European Union, with its Lisbon Treaty and its Article 42.7 on solidarity and mutual assistance, would obviously be called in to plug the gap. So this is the moment when the bells have to ring in Brussels. The European strategic autonomy has to become a reality. The hour of Europe, often proclaimed but never implemented, has finally arrived. Now, Ursula von der Leyen yesterday announced that in a new commission, if she's re-elected as president after the European Parliament elections in June, would appoint a European commissioner to deal with defence. This is something, by the way, that Friends of Europe, if I can just give a blurb for Friends of Europe, proposed way back in 2019. So it's good, even with a gap of 5 years, to see that this idea is finally making its way forward. The Commissioner for Defence would build on the good work of the current Commissioner for the Internal Market, Thierry Breton, in ramping up European production. Here, too, the news is not bad. This week, Chancellor Scholz in Germany laid the first stone of a new factory in Lower Saxony, which is going to produce 155mm ammunition for both Ukraine and for Europe as well. Many other countries are now stepping forward to help Ukraine with drones. For example, Latvia and the UK announced a deal whereby $200 million will be spent this year on supplying Kiev with drones, and other countries are participating in this. On Friday, President Macron will welcome President Zelensky in Paris, where they will sign a new bilateral security guarantee of France to Ukraine, building on those that were agreed at the NATO summit in Vilnius. The UK, for example, has already done that already. So, and finally, of course, the European Union has managed to approve that extra tranche of 500 billion euros to help Ukraine. So a lot is happening in European defence at the present time, but clearly with the uncertainty in the United States, it would be nothing but a prudent insurance policy for the Europeans now to take their strategic autonomy seriously and to build up their defence capacity as well. The new commissioner could also rightly agree on a stock take of European capabilities to see exactly where the shortfalls are, and then to make sure that European programs like the Permanent Structured Cooperation on Capabilities or the European Defence Fund can be re-engineered and refunded precisely to fill those capabilities as well. Finally, there has to be a debate on a European nuclear deterrent. This is not for today. Would the UK participate, not being a member of the EU? Would France ever accept to share its nuclear deterrence with other EU allies when it's always wanted that to be independent? Can we continue to rely upon the American nuclear deterrent? These are very complicated questions, and they certainly shouldn't be discussed in public. But at the same time, if Europe is to be truly strategic autonomous, it has to see how it also can have these deterrence at the most ultimate level of the ladder, as well as in other areas. Of course, nuclear is not the priority at the moment. Europe needs to spend the money above all in plugging its conventional gaps. But Europe now needs a concept for being able to make its way in the world, hopefully with the United States, but by itself, if necessary, without the United States. Let's hope that that doesn't happen, because if the US remains loyal to NATO, all of these European efforts will make NATO stronger as well. Thank you for listening today. Look forward, as always, to engaging with you very, very soon. Let's keep a close eye on what comes out of Munich. But in the meantime, have a good weekend.